Well, hello, my friends. I think we are finally rebooting. How beautiful it is to realize that all of us, in spite of all the preparation, all the efforts to get everything lined up ahead of time, all the times you check and double check and triple check technology, all of us, even with the team of six down the hall ready to give you a hand and give you some help, deal with some issues. I want to begin today's message by thanking you for being part of our community and thanking you for 8 minutes of grace. 8 minutes of time to reflect on why you're here in the first place, why we are celebrating this day in the first place, and why we have the great honor of coming together freely in this first place. It was not my intention to start with a long pause. It was the internet's intention, but we are back. We are ready to rock and roll. And what I wanted to do today is to first remind you of the question at hand, which is, what do you think is the most important characteristic for highly effective leadership? So what do you think is the most important characteristic for highly effective leadership? We'll come back to your answer to that question momentarily. But I want to begin by you, my friends, turning in a little bit of the homework from last week. You may remember that I put in front of you last month now, this chart of health and fitness and home and family and spirituality, relationships and the way we communicate, finances, our careers, our leisure, our fun, and our self-development. And on the front side of the year, we wanted to put in front of us specific things we could do in one area to keep growing, to keep expanding, to get a little bit better. So I had you last month pick one goal in one area that you wanted to focus on in 2020. This should sound very familiar to you. If it does not, go back to last month's, check it out again, and then come back, catch up with us. Here we go. I told you to pick one thing that you can do on a regular basis to get better in, so that you can grow in this one area. And then I told you to track your progress with that one goal in that one area to get better by doing one thing. Can you track your progress? And I put in front of you a few reasons why you should do exactly that. Gave you the example of Matt Miller's son and his desire to track his progress on shooting. 100 shots, 250 shots, 200 shots, 150 shots, get better and better. Try not to miss any days. Do one thing, hammer one nail so you can take that thing all the way down into the wood and get real traction. Have you been doing it? Have you been tracking your progress? In our office, we begin every single team meeting now. We meet once a week as a team, primarily on professional goals. What are we doing here to drive potential through Live Inspired? But we begin the meetings by saying, and what are you doing personally to make sure that you are in the right place? Heather, for instance, is all about harmonizing this year. Some of us are into meal prep. Some of us are into getting relationships right. Some of us are into walking every day at the sunrise. I'm into journaling every day, spiritual progress. So I want to spend about 45 minutes a day with God in prayer, reflecting, reading, and then tracking progress on how I'm doing. As I look down at this calendar, I see some check marks, but I also see some blank areas, which means I see an opportunity to improve, to do better. What about you? How are you doing as you track your progress this year on the goals, on the things, and specifically the activity that will ensure this is your best year yet? If you have any challenges with this, I just encourage you right now to hit reply to the studio emails. Let us know what we can do to further support you. But this is something we want you to grow and thrive in 2020. So if you're struggling with this plan, hit reply to the email that reminded you we are meeting in an hour, okay? Because we want to make sure that this is, in fact, your best year yet. Now, my friends, back to the question at hand and the reason for coming together today, the blueprint of success, utilizing the promise of your life to build something bigger than your life. If you haven't yet texted me, chatted with me, do it now. I want you to answer the question at the bottom of that screen. Here we go. I'll read a few of what I'm seeing in front of me. But if you haven't yet sent yours in, participate. Show up. Be all in. Here we go. Here are 4 or 5 that I'll just read out to you. Chris, welcome. Chris talked about integrity, the willingness to do what is right, even when it's not popular. Woo, Chris, you're stealing my thunder, man. That's essentially the essence of our studio today. Right on. Integrity, doing what is right, even if it's not popular. Amy, hello, Amy. Good communication in all types of situations and having vision. Yes, Amy. Again, that's what we'll be talking about today. Kim, vision. Yes, indeed. Michael agrees with Amy. Great and frequent communication. Yes, and yes. Julie, listening. We rarely do that these days, Julie. We rarely do that. But to listen with the intent only to understand. Thank you for reminding us of that. And my dear friend, Raylene. Hello, Raylene. Authenticity in every respect. Awesome. Hello, Raylene. And totally agree. Authenticity in every respect. One more that just popped up. Amanda, empathy. Empathy. Keep them coming in if you haven't finished up yet, but I agree that in order to build out this blueprint of success, in order to truly effectively lead forward as a leader, we got to listen, we got to have vision, we got to be authentic, we got to have empathy. I sometimes wonder if our leaders today at senior levels, whether you want to look at work or government, have that piece that Amanda shared, this piece of empathy, great compassion. We'll be talking today about someone who had the leadership capabilities that you are referring to today, my friends. So let's talk about it. Blueprints. Blueprints. We all know from the construction industry, KC Chuck, for instance, is in real estate in KC, that in order to build something great, you got to have a blueprint for it. You can't just go out there with some lumber and some cement, a few nails, a couple sheets of drywall, and build. If you do, it's going to look like the tree fort that my friends and I built in my backyard when I was 7 years old. We were in a new neighborhood, and we would borrow some material from the construction sites and build tree houses with it, with the permission, by the way, of the workers. But what we built never looked like the home in front of you right there. It was a child's train wreck. But we got that thing up. We never were able to get into it because it was too dangerous. But at least we started building the treehouse. We needed, though, a blueprint. We need a blueprint for our lives. We need a blueprint for our lives. So I want to give you today 4 steps, 4 characteristics, 4 ideas that will allow you and free you, liberate you to have this blueprint of true success in your life personally, spiritually, financially, professionally, in movement. 4 ideas here, okay? Write them down, please. Number 1, fervent hunger. These may not have been exactly what you were expecting, but I wish for you this idea of fervent hunger. A great desire for something in your life or through your life. Fervent hunger. That's number 1. It's a great part of a blueprint. Secondly, and this one may surprise you, complete surrender. Not a white flag of quitting. We're talking about a white flag of victory on this one. Okay? So fervent hunger. Write them down, please. Fervent hunger, complete surrender. Thirdly, I love this word, so we're going to use it today. Magnanimous humility. Magnanimous humility. Awesome. We're going to have magnanimous humility today. And then fourthly, unyielding conviction. So these are going to be the 4 building blocks that are going to guide us into creating the blueprint of success in our lives, relationally, professionally, spiritually, and as we create movements of change to improve people's lives around us and within us. So my friends, without further ado, let's dive and dance right into it with the first piece. You ready for it? What's the first one? Come on, type it in. Let's engage today. We're going to talk about being fervent in our hunger. Fervent hunger. Where did I get this idea for fervent hunger? My friends, today in the United States and in 4 other countries, by the way, around the world, including Japan, we celebrate our friend Martin Luther King Jr. His birthday was, I believe, January 15th. This is the day we celebrate nationally. It's why many of you teachers are off. It's why many of you have kids at home today, because of his life, because of his work, because of his words, because of his mission. But I want to begin today not with him in front of 1 million people in D.C., casting that dream. I want to begin with where his fervent hunger began. Martin Luther King Jr. never knew that he was a person of color. How could he? He was a child. He had friends of all different backgrounds, and then at age 5, that began to change. A little friend of his who was white no longer would come out and play with him. And Martin couldn't understand why that was. It made no sense at all to a young Martin Luther King Jr. why he could no longer play with this little friend of his. And then, not long after that, a woman turned around while he was in a mall, a shopping store, and said, "You stepped on my foot." And then she used a derogatory term toward him, a word he'd never heard before, because he'd never had it spoken at home. He'd never had it spoken to him. It was in Atlanta, Georgia. He went home crying to his mother after being slapped, by the way, by this white woman, and said, "Mama, why did she talk to me like that, and why did she slap me?" And his mother said, "Martin," explained what racism was all about, and she said, "You need to have fervent hunger, and you need to recognize that you are somebody, that nobody can take away your self-worth." But that term, fervent hunger, for doing better in your life, for not being defined by someone else's description of you in your life, changed the way that Martin Luther King Jr. went through his young life. It changed the way he viewed himself. It also changed the way he viewed his future. Fervent hunger. I'm going to go through a transcript of his that revealed fervent hunger. And then we'll go through a few of the other things he did, and then we'll come back to a question for us. This is from Crozer Theological Seminary. There's a couple things I want to point out to you, so I'll circle them. This is his report card. I'm glad none of you can see my report cards. They're not online for a purpose. I've gone through and I've expunged the record. You'll no longer be able to see my report cards, which is a blessing. But you can see MLK's. Here it is. I want to first call out the fact that the greatest public speaker of all time passed. He passed in that quarter. But in term two, the one that followed, in public speaking, the greatest presenter, the greatest speaker of all time, got a C plus in college. And it's going downhill. In term number three, the greatest orator of all time got a C. I just found that ironic. I wonder who that teacher was. I wonder how they feel about themselves today. It must have been a great teacher, because apparently Martin Luther King Jr. took some notes and did a pretty phenomenal job upon graduating. Martin Luther King Jr. not only was a speaker, but a profound writer. No one really knows why they are alive until they know what they are willing to die for. As a young man, he felt this calling on his heart to live for something bigger than himself. It was why he was so studious, why he was so focused, why he had this fervent hunger within him. My friends, a couple bullets that I want you to recognize about the man whose birthday you were celebrating today. He was so focused that he was able to skip 9th grade, freshman year, and he skipped senior year. He graduated Morehouse College at age 19. I got into university myself at age 19. He attended Crozer Theological Seminary. It was a primarily white student body. But Martin Luther King Jr. was so respected for the way he showed up every day with fervent hunger that he was elected president of the student body. This is up in Pennsylvania. He went on to receive his PhD from Boston University at age 24, graduated before taking his first job in Montgomery, Alabama. We'll come back down there here in a moment, so wait for it. This was a man who was incredibly hungry for growing in life. And so I want you to think just for a moment about where that fervent hunger shows up in your life. With your journals open, okay? In what area or areas of your life is there a fervent hunger for you to improve yourself, to achieve something great, or to make something better for somebody else? Ladies, gentlemen, Raylene, Casey, Chuck, K2, Amanda, Amy, everybody else tuning in right now, in what areas of your life is there a fervent hunger, this desire, this desire to improve yourself, to achieve something great, or to make something better for someone else? You got 60 seconds to reflect on where there should be or where there might already be a fervent hunger. Could be to grow this year as a real estate agent, or in a mission call, or charitable giving, or in a relationship with a loved one at home, someone that you've fallen out of love with, maybe in an addiction for some of us, a dream. I have a dream for some of us. Where's there hunger pains in your life to see change for the better? Fervent hunger. Kind of fervent hunger that allows you to skip a couple grade levels, to fit in when no one else says you even belong, to thrive, to graduate, to serve, to change the world through your life. We don't need to be standing and speaking in front of 1 million people at the DC Mall to do it, my friends. But we got to commit to doing it today, I believe, with fervent hunger. So we're going to start there. 30 more seconds. If you're still riding, keep riding. If you're not hungry for anything, it's been too long since you've gone without a meal. There are too many needs in our families, in our communities, in our culture, in the world, in our workplaces. Nurses, teachers, doctors, business owners, philanthropists, and whatever you're doing today, not to have this aching pain to see something redeemed through your efforts, this fervent hunger. Where's yours? Write about it. Okay? And then take the next step. Surrender. We're going to call it today complete surrender. You tracking with me? Here we go. My friends, you recognize this woman. The man behind her you recognize certainly, but the woman on the foreground is a woman named Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks is a woman in 1955, December 1st, who has worked a full day. I don't know about all of you, but after a full day of work, I'm tired. Well, she's tired too. She pays for the bus, she gets on, she sits down, and as the bus progresses toward her home, it keeps getting more and more and more crowded. And eventually there's a white man who gets on the bus, and there's no room for him. So the bus driver walks back and says, "Get up." She refuses. He says again, "Get up. There's a white man that needs a seat." She refuses. She paid. He yells again. Eventually the police officers get involved, and our friend Rosa Parks gets arrested for the audacity to refuse as a woman who had already paid for her spot on the bus to not stand up when a white man approached. This is 1955. This is not generations and generations ago. My father was 13 years old. My mother was 11. This is in our lifetime for many of us. This is real and raw. This is part of who we are still, not who we once were. This is who we are. This happened. 1955, December 1st. She's arrested. After getting out, she was interviewed, and one of the things Rosa Parks said was, when that white driver stepped back toward us, when he waved his hand and ordered us up out of our seats, I felt a determination cover my body like a quilt on a winter night. This fervent hunger that she had to not get up, to stay seated, to recognize that she was somebody, that she had worth, that she paid to get on that bus like everybody else. Well, that's December 1st. Rosa Parks went to a little Baptist church in Montgomery. The church was called Holt Street Baptist Church, a little church nobody's ever going to hear of, led by a minister that in all likelihood no one in the world will ever hear from. The minister, by the way, was a 25-year-old. This is how the world is connected as one, my friends. This is a reminder of how invaluable your life is. Rosa Parks refuses to stand, gets arrested, goes to church, speaks to her minister, a young man named Martin Luther King Jr., who at age 25 realizes that he is now called to do more than even preach on Sundays and lead Bible studies on Wednesdays. He is called to lead a mission to remind the people of Montgomery, that's it, just Montgomery, that they are people of value. He goes home that night, though, recognizing that if he decides here to take a stand, he is risking his life, he is risking his family's life, he is taking a great risk. But he has fervent hunger. He's always had it. He has totally surrendered to a cause greater than himself. He always really has. In the face of great hatred and great fear, great racism of the day, it was not hiding away only at nighttime. It was alive and well in living color all day long back then in Montgomery. He goes home that night. He loves his wife. He loves his child. And he recognizes it is time to take a stand. It is time as a 25-year-old to allow my voice to be heard. So he goes back to church that night. And the first message that has been recorded of Martin Luther King Jr. is going to be played for you here in a moment. I'm going to play for you 4 minutes of it. So it's 4 minutes of that night at Holt Baptist Street Church when Martin Luther King Jr. reminds these individuals at church on Monday night of the value of their lives and the reason why what they are setting out to do, which is simply to not get back on the bus until things change on the buses. That it has meaning. We're going to do it peacefully, but we are going to do it, and we are going to do it together. So I'm going to play this speech for you today in honor of Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, in honor of his life. Let me pull this up for you, please. As I sit back, the question I want you to be reminded of is, what are you listening to? Like, what are you hearing? What are you hearing in his words? What are you hearing in his heart? Listen for his tone. Listen for the conversation. What most people don't realize, so I'm a speaker, as many of you know. When I speak in front of a church or in front of a large client or in front of a group of 3 kids, it's a conversation. Most people sit back, arms crossed, don't really lean in, don't really participate, don't really raise their hand, don't really speak back. But what are you hearing from the audience that night in this church? It's December 5th, it's 1955. Okay? Tell me what you're hearing. I'm going to hit play on this, and I'll put the words on the screen so you can follow along. Here we go.
When people get being taken over by the iron feet of oppression. There comes a time, my friend, when people get tired of being harmed for past the abyss of humiliation, where they experience the bleakness and nagging despair. There comes a time when people get tired of being pushed out as a glittering sunlight of last July, left standing amid the piercing chill of an alpine November. We are here this evening because we're tired now. Now let's assume that we are not here advocating violence. We have never done that. I want it to be known throughout Montgomery and throughout this nation that we are Christian people. We believe in the Christian religion. We believe in the teachings of Jesus. The only weapon that we have in our hands this evening is a weapon of protest.
My friends, he goes on from there to unpack and to remind these audience members, these people, that they have value, that their lives have worth, that they are going to take a stand for what is right. And it was right. And there were risks that came with that stand. There were risks of racism, of people coming at them, of lynchings. Tens of thousands of people were lynched. Tens of thousands. This happened in our history. So that night when they collected and said, we will take a stand. We will take a stand. And the only weapon that we will have in our hands this evening and going forward is the weapon of protest. That is all. That is all. That was the stand that Martin Luther King Jr. would take for the next 15 years of his life, starting at age 25 and continuing until age 39. That was the stand that he took. That was the stand that he encouraged his followers to take, a peaceful stand. So now I lead us to a question. I want you to think for a moment, my friends. His voice in the conversation that he was having with his congregation, this church, this community, this group of people that for too long had been enslaved to what the bindings of yesterday. What did you hear from Martin Luther King Jr.? What was the message? What was the tone? What was the response? What's the mood in the room? What did you hear? It's part of a much longer, it's a 44-minute sermon. But from what you heard of it, what did you hear? And I'd like you to chat that to me. What was the buzz? What was the main takeaway? What did you hear? I think the best educators are always the ones that make you work with them. So they're not the most articulate necessarily, They're not the ones who do the heavy lifting for you. They're the ones that have a conversation with you and really make you work for it. And so today, like my friend Martin Luther King Jr., this man who, as I've spent the last several weeks researching his life, has blown me away at his humility, at his courage, at his faithfulness, at his zest for something greater than himself. This is a man who easily could have been a surgeon, easily could have been an attorney, easily could have been taught in Boston and never had a mess once going south of the Mason-Dixie line. Never once. But this is a man who took his family down south in order to make a difference where the challenges were. What did you hear in his tone, in his message, and in the response of the people in church that night? What did you hear? I'm going to share a little bit from what I'm hearing from you. Then we're going to turn the page into the third characteristic that is a blueprint for success in our lives. Hope. Thank you, Julie. Passion. Passion. Man, I wish I could just play that whole thing for you. But I think some of you would be like, dude, you got to do a little bit of work, O'Leary, today. Hope and passion. Right on. Someone in touch with his feelings and the feelings of his peers. Thank you. Total conviction, total belief in what he was doing and recognizing that it was right. Thank you, Kim. A calling. So here's my question to you now, my friends. In what aspect of your life do you feel a gentle nudge or a strong tug to let go of something, to say yes to something, to accept responsibility for something, to take a stand for something, to say yes and completely surrender to something? It could be with an aging parent, a child, not-for-profit that you've considered working with for a while, a calling in our community, something at work, something in your personal journey, a dream. But in what area of your life do you feel a gentle nudge or a strong tug to let go of something, to say yes to something, accept responsibility for something, or take a stand and completely surrender, which is what MLK did on December 5th, 1955, having no clue what it was going to lead to, but completely surrender to something? I want you to write about that just for a moment in your journals by answering in short the question today. I say yes and I completely surrender to this. Maybe it's forgiving yourself, forgiving someone else. What are you saying yes to today? What are you completely surrendering to today? In your journals, we're just going to begin the work. You're going to do the real efforts after 11:30 Central today because I want to get through the next two segments. But as a beginning point, today, my friends, I say yes and I completely surrender to what? Write it down. Put a comma behind it, though, not an exclamation point. You're just beginning the journey. But it begins by saying yes. It begins frequently by leaving the comfort of home and going out, taking a risk, and standing up for what is right. Sometimes that's within our family. Sometimes that's within our community. Sometimes that's at work. Sometimes it's with an addiction or a dream. This idea around forgiveness, whatever it may be for you. Harmony, Heather. But today I want you to say yes. I want you to completely surrender to something. And then I want you to take the next page out of this blueprint. Here we go. Magnanimous humility. I love the word magnanimous. I also love the word humility, but I'll unpack both of them right now just to make sure we're all on the same page. Magnanimous, if you want to write it down, means noble, worthy, upright, benevolent, altruistic. It's a great word, magnanimous. How many individuals in this community who are of places of great leadership do we consider magnanimous? Noble, worthy, upright, benevolent, altruistic. I don't care what side of the aisle you sit on. Answer that one honestly. And then the word humility. I know you know what it means, but I think when you see it unpacked, it's even more powerful. And the gap between how many people are living this every day, unpretentious, with modesty, meekness, unassuming, servant-natured, magnanimous humility. And I believe we see this from the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., actually. I know it may not be typically what you would think of first when you think of MLK, man, magnanimous humility. But I'm telling you right now, this idea of leaving home and serving in the community reveals itself to be magnanimous humility. And maybe my favorite example of it is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s work with kids. He's remembered primarily for speaking in front of large audiences, but some of his finest work was done one-to-one with kids. And one of my favorite speeches he ever delivered was given at a high school in Philadelphia in front of junior high kids. This was a man who was wildly busy, pulled in a million directions, had 4 of his own children, his own wife, his own parents, his own church community, and yet made time. You'll never find time. He made time to spend time with kids. And there is a recording from a talk that he gave at Barrett Junior High School on October 26, 1967. I'm going to hit play. It's only about a 2.5 minute long presentation. I want you to listen to his tone. I want you to listen to what he's saying. I want you to listen to the words that he's speaking, the profound love that he's giving these kids, and how he's reminding them that they matter in a society, in a culture that is saying otherwise. MLK is standing in front of a group of junior high kids and saying, you matter, you matter. He begins his speech with them. It's a 20-minute speech in total by saying, hey, I want to ask you a question, and that is, by the way, this is where I borrow a question for you today. Kids, what is your life's blueprint? What is your life's blueprint? And he says, this is the most important and crucial period of your lives. For what you do now what you decide now at this age may well determine which way your life will go. This is true for us in junior high. It's also true for us tuning in today at the Live Inspired channel. This is the most important day of your life today. What you choose today at this age, what you choose to do will define what happens and the direction the rest of your life will go. He gave them 3 things he wanted them to take away. He wanted them to realize and have deep belief in their dignity, their own worth, and their somebodyness. You are somebody. He kept reminding them, you are somebody. My friends, we need a message like MLK's for our kids in junior high today, because most of them don't realize that they are somebody. Most of them truly don't believe that they have dignity, and the brothers and sisters seated next to them have dignity. Most of them do not believe in their own self-worth. They may have followers, they may have Instagram channels, but they don't truly believe at the end of the day, when their eyes are shut, that they are somebody, that they have dignity, that they have self-worth. Well, it was even more so back in Philadelphia in the mid-60s. MLK reminded them they were somebody. He reminded them also to have a basic principle, to excel in whatever field they choose to endeavor in, and a commitment to the eternal principles of beauty, of love, and of justice. But I want to play for you my favorite clip from his talk. It's remarkably powerful. And one of my favorite quotes that MLK ever shared comes out of this talk in front of this group of kids. As you listen to him sharing with them that whatever job they endeavor to do it with great vigor. I want you to also listen to how the children respond. He's reminding them that if they choose to become a custodian or a street sweeper, that there's value in that. This is a message very seldom being offered to our kids in junior high or at any other level today. As powerful as his words are, listen to the response from the kids. Because I'm going to ask you at the end of this talk, what did you hear? What did you hear? Okay? So let me play this conversation now from Martin Luther King Jr. It's from a famous talk he gave, What is Your Life's Blueprint?
To burn the midnight oil. I would say to you, don't drop out of school, and I understand all of the sociological reasons why we often drop out of school. But I urge you, in spite of your economic plight, in spite of the situation that you are forced to live so often with intolerable conditions, stay in school. And when you discover what you're going to be in life, set out to do it as if God Almighty called you at this particular
moment in history to do it. And just don't set out to do a good Negro job, but do a good job that anybody could do. Don't set out to be just a good Negro doctor, a good Negro lawyer, a good Negro school teacher, a good Negro preacher, a good Negro barber, a beautician, a good Negro skilled laborer. For if you set out to do that, you have already flunked your matriculation exam for entrance into the University of Integration. Set out to do a good job and do that job so well that the living, the dead, or the unborn couldn't do it any better.
These are kids going crazy for a desire to do great work at a high level.
It falls your lot to be a street sweeper. Sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures. Sweep streets like Beethoven composed music. Sweep streets like Leontine Price sings before the Metropolitan Opera. And sweep streets like Shakespeare wrote poetry. Sweep streets so well that all the host of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, here lived a great street sweeper who swept his job well.
My friends, we could go on and on with Martin Luther King Jr. speaking with this group of kids and their response to him and this conversation they're having and this pride that they're having in their race, in their life, in their dignity, in their somebodyness, in the blueprint that they are setting out to change their world. One of the cool things, if you do a little bit of research on this speech, many of the kids that were in that room that day did not want to be in that room. They did not like Martin Luther King Jr. They did not like the idea of being a Negro, being an African American in this community. And then he stepped into their world. He stepped into that classroom and he changed them forever in a 20-minute speech, reminding them that they were somebody, that they had dignity. But you got to act like it. You got to act like it. What a gift he gave them. So my question to us listening to this now, with the insight of 50 years or so to hear it well, is this question. You knew it was coming, so I'm going to put it in front of you. What did you hear? What did you hear? And again, I want to hear from you on what you heard. You have the ability to chat with me right now. It's a two-way conversation. What did you hear as Martin Luther King Jr., about a year or so before he died, took time to spend 20 minutes of his life with kids who would be forever changed because of it? What did you hear? Please chat me. I want to hear what you heard. Starting to see a few responses. Keep them coming in, my friends. Passion. Connection. Value. Worth. Empowerment. That's a great word. Thank you, Jen. Pride. I have the honor of speaking to Fortune 500 organizations, speaking in boardrooms, speaking to men and women who make a lot of money leading organizations, so boardrooms, right? I had the honor, though, about 2 years ago, speaking to a group of custodians, street sweepers who choose to do their craft in hospitals. There were about 120 custodians in the room, and I got to share the story of my nurse, Roy, and I got to share the story of my custodian, my janitor, Lavelle, and I got to share the story of how those two people specifically changed and saved my life. How because they swept the streets as if Michelangelo himself was there painting, because of that, a little boy named John O'Leary at age 9 would go on to survive the terrible fire and go on to thrive in life because of their work. And at the end of that story, you should have felt the pride in the room for the work that they did. They were somebody. They had dignity, and they did their job well. What an honor it is to be reminded that we have lives that have meaning in a marketplace that frequently reminds us it doesn't have meaning. Life doesn't have meaning, certainly yours doesn't. We need messages like MLK's and so many others to remind us your life has meaning, but do it well. Do it well. Do your life today well. If you're in retirement today, do it well. If you're sweeping streets, do it well. If you're a nurse, do it well. If you're teaching, Matt, coaching, Amy, booking podcast, whatever it might be, do it well. Do it well. I'll share two more. Kim, no matter what you do it with love and excellence and commitment. Awesome, Kim. And Rona, my friend, we love you. Respect yourself and your God-given place on this earth and in this moment of time, because this time, your life, and Rona, you know this, it matters. It matters. Mikkel, don't limit yourself. Right on. Do not limit yourself. We could go on and on and on, but I want to make sure in the last 9.5 minutes we were able to share the final building block shared with us by Martin Luther King Jr. on how we can create a blueprint for true success in our lives. So, my friends, buckle up. Get ready for the ride. Your homework assignment is to reflect on this and what areas of your life might you benefit from a little magnanimous humility. What service project have you said no to because it's below you? What job around the home do you no longer do because it's not worth your effort? Who do you see across the street that isn't worth crossing because it's that person, it's them, it's people that you don't really connect with naturally? Where might we benefit from a little magnanimous humility in our lives? I know there are many places for me. I'll be reflecting on this not only tonight and going forward, but looking forward to reporting back to you on where I decided that there needed to be a little bit more magnanimous humility in my own walk. What about in yours? My friends, in addition to that, as we get ready to put a cap on this program today, I want us to have unyielding conviction for the work that we do and the lives that we live. So if you're tuning in late, that's fine. Welcome to the Live Inspired channel, baby. You are at studio. Our next studio, by the way, in case I run out of time, is going to be February 10th. So note it right now, 10:30 Central Time. Write it down now. You'll want to be there for that one. It's going to be awesome. Get ready for it. Buckle up. But before we get to February 10th, we got to finish strong today with unyielding conviction. Unyielding conviction. There in Memphis, one of the most difficult jobs to do were those in charge of waste management. Those who were responsible for picking up the garbage for the entire city. It was one of the most underpaid jobs. In fact, they were so underpaid that those who worked full-time still were able to receive benefits like unemployment benefits. Even a full-time laborer was so impoverished that they did not make enough to make ends meet. The dangerous work environment led eventually to two of their workers dying on the same day. It was a malfunction. Both men were smashed in the back of a garbage collector. The men were not, though, given any compensation for losing their lives. There was no time to mourn those who lost their lives, and so there was a small walkout planned. It got bigger and bigger and bigger until the entire group walked out. And into this group begins a movement, because they did not see these trash collectors, these waste management individuals, as men. So there was a simple slogan that they began in Memphis, Tennessee in 1968, reminding the citizens of that community that we're men. We're not just those people. We have dignity. We have value. Our lives have value. We're men. All we ask is that you treat us as such. We're men. The marches were peaceful, but they were met with great contempt. And then on April 4th in Atlanta, Georgia, a man wakes up named Martin Luther King Jr. He flies up that morning. He's sick, truly. He's exhausted. He almost did not make the trip, but he recognized that there was a calling on his life to live for something bigger than himself. So on April 4th, he wakes up in Atlanta, gets onto a plane, flies into Memphis, Tennessee, and he delivers a presentation that will become his last of his lifetime. My friends, I'm going to play just the final 2 minutes of this talk. In life, In some seasons, there are prophets among us, people who see over the horizon what no one else can even begin to imagine possible. One of the prophets of our time, in my mind, in my estimation, and doing the research around MLK, is this person. Very far from being popular. He was hated in his own time, but he saw over the horizon what was possible, not only for a group of people and for a society, for better and for worse, but also for himself. So I'm going to play for you the final 3 minutes of the final message ever delivered by Martin Luther King Jr. On the front side of this message, by the way, in front of those who were in charge of waste management for the city of Memphis, this is now 3,000 people who are trying to remind themselves and one another that we are men, that we have value, that we're not going to be defined by a job that we do or by the color of our skin. No longer. Martin Luther King Jr. reminds them of how fortunate he feels to be part of the movement with them. And he goes through the entire 1960s, beginning in 1960, all the way through now into 1968, reminding them how blessed and fortunate he feels to be with them along the journey. And then he shares with them final words of what he has seen. If it's been a while since you've heard this one, I invite you to buckle up for it, because it is some of the most prophetic words that you'll ever hear. And as I get ready to hit play on this, I want you again to ask yourself the question as MLK is speaking: what have you heard? What did you hear? What was the tone? What was the message? What was the vision? What was the dream? What was the authenticity behind it? You're going to hear him, by the way, begin by sharing the story of what happened after he was first stabbed. This was a man who was imprisoned, I think, 13 times. A man whose mother was eventually assassinated. A man who was stabbed. A man whose house with his children in it was bombed twice. It's a man who lived a very, very, very hard life, okay? Very hard life. And at the end of this life, he gives a speech kind of capturing the best of that life and why he's lived this life to this point. So please open wide your hearts on MLK Day to listen to the final speech ever delivered by Martin Luther King Jr.
Times the next morning that if I had merely sneezed, I would have died. Well, about 4 days later, they allowed me, after the operation, after my chest had been opened and the blade had been taken out, to move around in the wheelchair in the hospital. They allowed me to read some of the mail that came in, and from all over the states and the world, kind letters came in. I read a few, but one of them I will never forget. I had received one from the president and the vice president. I've forgotten what those telegrams said. I'd received a visit and a letter from the governor of New York, but I've forgotten what that letter said. Yes. But there was another letter that came from a little girl, a young girl, who was a student at the White Plains High School. And I looked at that letter, and I'll never forget it. Said simply, "Dear Dr. King, I am a 9th grade student at the White Plains High School." She said, "While it should not matter, I would like to mention that I'm a white girl. I read in the paper of your misfortune and of your suffering. And I read that if you had sneezed, you would have died. I'm simply writing you to say that I'm so happy that you didn't sneeze. And I want to say tonight, that I too am happy that I didn't sneeze, because if I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1960. And students all over the South started sitting in at lunch hours. And I knew that as they were sitting in, they were really standing up for the best in the American dream, taking the whole nation back to those great wells of democracy, which were dug deep by the founding fathers in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1961 when we decided to take a ride for freedom and ended segregation in interstate travel. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1962. The Negroes in Albany, Georgia decided to straighten their backs up. And whenever men and women straighten their backs up, they are going somewhere, because a man can't ride your back unless it is bent. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been here in 1963. The black people of Birmingham, Alabama, aroused the conscience of this nation, brought into being the Civil Rights Bill. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have had a chance later that year in August to try to tell America about a dream that I had had. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been down in Selma, Alabama to see the great movement there. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been in Memphis to see a community rally around those brothers and sisters who are suffering. I'm so happy that I didn't sneeze. They were telling me. Now it doesn't matter now. It really doesn't matter what happens now. I left Atlanta this morning, and as we got started on the plane, there were 6 of us. The pilot
There's
said,
60 seconds left, my friends. Hang on for it.
Public address system, we are sorry for the delay. But we have Dr. Martin Luther King on the plane. And to be sure that all of the bags were checked. And to be sure that nothing would be wrong on the plane, we had to check out everything carefully. And we've had the plane protected and guarded all night. And then I got into Memphis. And some began to say the threats, or talk about the threats that were out. What would happen to me from some of our sick white brothers. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
And with that, Martin Luther King takes a seat and finishes the last presentation that he will ever deliver against the side of eternity. Friends, as I try to figure out how to go back live with you, to hop onto a plane when you are ill, to give a speech when you are exhausted, to share your heart when you are wiped out, to give your life for a cause greater than yourself. What it reminds me is not only what we celebrate this day, but what he was challenging us to do, not only back then on April 5th, 1968, but each day of our lives, is to prepare ourselves to live in such a manner that we are willing to lay it down for something greater than ourselves. So as we get ready to wrap up this studio, we started 8 minutes late, we're going to go 4 minutes late. What did you hear from Martin Luther King Jr. on that final presentation before his passing away, before his murder? before those words were immortalized that we can listen to in great freedom today. What did you hear from this man as he came to what he somehow knew to be the end of his life? What did you hear? So that's a question I want you to consider right now. I'd love to hear from you as we get ready to wrap up together. I know some of us are racing off into lunch meetings and into the next opportunities of the day, but for those of us still tuning in right now, in that voice as he recaptured 1960 and 61 and Selma and Alabama and everything, what did you hear? And then as he was able to come to the top of the mountaintop and peek over in that passion, that hope, in that view. He may not get there with us, but what did you hear? What did you hear? Ten seconds. Type in those keys. Let me know what you heard during that speech, the final of his life. What did you hear? An amazing storyteller, Amy says, focuses on truly impacting a impactful message with a bit of humor. If I had sneezed. Right on. What a message. What a delivery. What a human. What a mind. Julie, I heard endurance. He's just a Baptist minister at a small church in Montgomery as a 25-year-old with a young family. And 15 years later, the day before he's assassinated, he's going through all the things that he was able to do because he did not sneeze. If I had sneezed, I heard endurance too, Julie. Kim, no matter what we do it with love and excellence and commitment. Thank you, Kim. Rona, respect yourself and your God-given place on this earth and in the moment of time because it matters. Yes. Powerful inspiration. A reflection of the past and a vision for the future, says Lisa. A vision that includes peace. My friends, what do you hear? And as important as that is what do we do with it? What do we do with it? So as we wrap up our time together today, and then by the way, after hearing 3 of his speeches, you can probably understand why I spent way more than 40 hours listening to speeches and reading content from Martin Luther King Jr. I'll encourage you strongly today as you go through your day, as you take lunch, as you take an afternoon break, as you have a few minutes down later on this evening, rather than just turning on the TV and seeing what CSI is saying or what Channel 2 or 4 or 5 or CNN or Fox is saying, listen to what a great hero among us said 50 years ago. What he was saying had value then. It has incredible value and staying power today. So my final question to you as we get ready to wrap up this Live Inspired studio is, as you consider your work, my friends, your family, my friends, your spiritual journey, or your community, where might you benefit from some unyielding conviction? If you had sneezed, the reality is you have not sneezed. You are still here. You are still in the game. You still have breath in your lungs, an opportunity ahead. And we believe that the best is in front of us. But in order to fully leverage it and step into the blueprint of our lives, we must embrace unyielding conviction. This ability that we have each day as the sun rises to say yes to it. Yes. Yes. But if I had sneezed, my friends, mine eyes have seen the glory, the promise of the Lord too. And I'm convinced and convicted as much today as ever before that the best of our time remains in front of us. We get there together, though. So I'm looking forward in February to turning the lens from MLK right back into you, into your work, into your journey, into your relationships, and into your life, and into the truth that the best is in front. So celebrate this MLK Day. Don't just use it as a day not to work, but use it as a day to really begin to truly live. For this time and until next time, this is John O'Leary. This is your day. Celebrate this national hero and choose today to live the blueprint of success in your life. Choose today to live inspired. Thanks for tuning in, my friends, as always.